Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 4 of our Food Safety Culture webinar series. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Vanessa Kaufman, Director of the Alliance to Stop Foodborne Illness, a program which brings together consumers, industry, academics, and regulators to work collaboratively to advance food safety culture throughout the food safety system. I am joined by my co-host, FDA's Dr. Conrad Chouanier, the Director of the Office of Microbiological Food Safety at FDA's Human Foods Program. Hi, Conrad. Today, we are going to hear from outstanding leaders in the industry about how to avoid complacency through proactive, ongoing reinforcement of company values. To access prior sessions and other archived materials, including two brand new white papers, one of which is featured here, you can scan the QR code on the screen or visit our website at stopfoodborneillness.org/alliance/webinar-series. Before we dive into today's session, I also have some housekeeping reminders. Can everybody hear me? I'm getting a lot of comments that they can't. Okay, sounds good. Okay, we'll keep going. We'll go with the housekeeping reminders. Please note that the chat function, microphones, and your cameras are disabled. You'll need to use the Q&A function to ask questions of our panelists. In the Q&A window, you can upvote questions, and the most popular will rise to the top. Like Series 1, Season 2 has been accredited by NEHA, so you can earn one continuing education credit from each webinar in the series. The details are posted on the STOP website and will be distributed via email following the webinar. You'll also find a recording of today's webinar and a copy of the slides on the Stop Foodborne Illness website sometime in the next few days. And please be aware this webinar is being recorded. It's now my pleasure to pass the mic over to Conrad and walk us through the agenda for some opening remarks.
Thanks, Vanessa, and thanks all of you for being here. FDA is really proud to be a co-host of this webinar series with Stop Foodborne Illness. Today we have three great speakers. We'll hear from our own Lone Jesperson, who has been a regular feature on our webinar, before diving into the experiences from two very different companies. We have Sean Leighton from Cargill and Sarah Nayani from Arctic Storm Management to share how they have been successful in operationalizing the values of their organization. Next slide. Just as a reminder, this whole webinar series this season has been based on the SHINE model of organizational culture, where we have our underlying beliefs that inform our espoused values that result in the artifacts that we see day to day in our culture. So today we're in that middle section thinking about how we live our values. And with that, I will pass it to Lone.
Thank you very much, Conrad. Thank you, Vanessa. It's always a pleasure being a part of this webinar series. And as Conrad said, we're using the SHINE model to really break down the different levels of culture, because you might find that there's different areas that you are particularly strong in, or others where you might not have so much focus, and therefore you can use that model to maybe plan out for the next little while as for where you need to make change. So for today, as we talk about living your values, let's talk a little bit about what that looks like when we go by it day by day. First of all, it sounds very easy. It's our values. We've declared them as an organization, and of course we live those because that's part of who we are. But is it really that easy? So if we first and foremost look at what are values? So values, think about, many organizations have 4 values or key guiding principles that says this is how we are going to operate and how we're going to hold each other to account. So it might be that plaque on the wall. It might be the values that you're evaluated against on an annual basis as for your performance, and how you're exhibiting these values when you behave the way you do in the organization, when you're making decisions, etc. So that's one way of looking at values. The second thing is that it's about guiding our own and other people's behaviors when we talk about values. And that's why it's so important when we talk about food safety culture, because values are, and I'll give an example in a second, values can guide us to do the right thing, values can be interpreted, the very same value that guided us to do the right thing can be interpreted by somebody else and actually deliver the exact opposite. But it is ultimately about how we use them to guide our own, but also how we provide feedback and hold each other accountable to operating and behaving in a certain way. If we then look at where the conflicts sometimes arise when we talk about values. So I have personal values based on my upbringing, by my ethnicity, by my experience. I join an organization. I might say, okay, yeah, it's great that we have a set of values, but the interpretation again of some of those values, I might interpret them in a different way because of the background, the environment that I come from as well. And therefore, sometimes you get into having this uncomfortable tension between your own beliefs and values and behaviors, not because you're intentionally trying to say, these are not my values as in the company values, but just because they're in my environment and my upbringing leads me to interpreting values in a certain way. So I had the wonderful opportunity to be part of Maple Leaf Foods for 11 years up in Canada, and we had a value called do what's right. And for me, coming from Denmark, doing what is right means that going back to somebody and saying, what you said before is not true, or I think you can do better. So being very directive or directing in my commentary. That's just not a value that is interpreted that way when you're in Canada, in this case with Maple Leaf Foods. So that interpretation really created a little bit of an uncomfortable tension within me because, hey, I need to change how I act to be able to deliver on that value. So cognitive dissonance is a real thing. It's something that many of us, if we start to look into it, will say that we experience every day. So what do we do with that? I think if you look at cognitive dissonance, then it's around saying, how do we take the values, live them every day, and at the same time minimize the risk that we have some of this internally self-imposed stress because we're interpreting things in different ways as for, I think this is the right thing to do, but my manager is telling me something else. So let's look at an example. So a value that we did a little bit of a search, and one of the values that come up a lot as a corporate value is integrity. And integrity is beautiful value, and in most companies is then broken into a little bit more specificity. If we take integrity and then look at, so how do we use that to guide our own and other people's behaviors? We click on to the next one, Lily, please. It could be that we say, okay, so we're looking at, in this case, we're looking at cabbage every day coming in from the field onto a conveyor belt. We might have to slow down the belt because we need to be able to spot if there's any debris attached to them that could cause foreign material issues. But if we take that and then say from a cognitive dissonance perspective, what is that conflict or tension that we might see there? Well, we might actually at the same time be rewarded in a bonus for how many heads of cabbage we can inspect and process per day. So there's a monetary value that's attached to our productivity. And that means if we can speed up the belt, then we could actually potentially get closer to that bonus. But I come to work every day looking at these cabbages, wanting to make sure that there's no foreign material in it. And therefore, I'd actually like to stop the line. But now we have that internal conflict and potential conflict with our company values as well. So what can we do with that? We could look at, for example, that this bonus is tied to food safety as 60% of the bonus and productivity. So it's not about delivering one or the other. So now we're using values to say it's a value of ours, obviously, to have a productive, profitable company, because that's what most companies, unless they're non-for-profit, is there to do. At the same time, of course, we have to make safe food as well. So, and solution like this would say, okay, we need one to have the other in both cases. And can we reward people so that that's influencing our behaviors, but we're still living the value of integrity? And it's pretty self-explanatory then that what is the food safety impact from that? Well, we're going to have less debris in the food. So it's going to translate right into consumer safety. And that is obviously what this is all about. But the good news to all of you is that we have, as Conrad said, two fantastic speakers with us today who has their own set of values, lots of experience, and is going to tell their stories as well. So Sean, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Wonderful. Lone, thank you very, very much for the excellent introduction. My name is Sean Leighton, and I'm based here in currently blizzarding Minneapolis, Minnesota. I work for Cargill as the global uh, food safety, quality, and regulatory affairs lead. I've been here at Cargill for about 9 years, and it continues to be an incredibly challenging, rewarding place to apply some of the principles Lone just introduced. I'm just going to the few minutes I have with you today are going to sort of take shape in three parts. One, just a little bit about Cargill, because if you're not familiar with Cargill, I think the context here is important. Two, some things that I've tried over the last 9 years to bring to life everything Lone just introduced. And then three, just sort of like what to take with you at the end, and some things you may be able to experiment or explore yourselves, whether you're in the industry, government, or maybe even the academic sector. I think all of this applies. What you see on the screen here is our purpose at Cargill: nourishing the world in a safe, responsible, sustainable way. Now, obviously, you don't have to squint too hard to see food safety show up in there. And what a wonderful privilege to have um, safe food showing up in the purpose statement of your company. And at Cargill, we really live by our purpose. We sit at the heart of the supply chain, partnering with producers, partnering with customers to source, make, and deliver products that are essential for the industry and essential for living, frankly. If you go to the next slide, I think this slide does a really nice job of showing just how vast the Cargill system or our involvement in the food ecosystem is. You know, we connect farmers with essential markets, customers with ingredients, consumers, families, you and I, with daily essentials from eggs, you see on the screen here, eggs, edible oils, salt, skincare, animal feed, alternative fuel. It really is a vast ecosystem and a continuously challenging place, rewarding place to work on food safety and to try to advance our culture. The the next slide here, you'll see a little bit of how we take that purpose that I just shared with you, nourishing the world in a safe, responsible, sustainable way, and realize it, right? And we do that through our values, and the enduring principles behind them. And the behaviors you see attached to these values are the choices and actions that help us at Cargill achieve our strategy. Our values and behaviors that you see here on the screen are intentionally interconnected to be more powerful, because these two things together help us enable the culture we need to drive high performance and achieve our purpose. One of the things I want to point out here is I think I kind of have this mentality of like a skyscraper mentality, which is sort of a funny thing to think about. But like honestly, I take part in a lot of conversations about quote unquote food safety culture. And you know, one of the things I'd like to share with you is I think it's essential that before you start to build a skyscraper, which kind of represents food safety culture, you've got to build down before you build up. You've got to build into the foundations of your culture, right? Before you can begin to invest in efforts to address and advance a food safety culture. Because a food safety culture standing on its own, with nothing like what you see on the screen here or equivalents across other organizations, really starts to lose some of its traction. So, you know, one of my messages to you here today is, you know, I think we as leaders in companies and organizations, we assume that these values are in place simply by stating them, you know, and at times as we attempt to reinforce these values, these behaviors, it'll maybe come across as being fundamental, or overly redundant or obvious, you know, or as Lone just stated a minute ago, easy to your teams, to your colleagues, to your stakeholders and audiences. And one of my messages today is continue to work on the foundation of your skyscraper. Don't just jump to food safety culture without taking this into account. I'm going to show you next just some of the things I've tried on, some of them successful, some of them not so successful in trying to bring that foundation into our food safety culture efforts. You know, this slide here, you see, this is something that I do on a continuous basis. Cargill evaluates our personal performance as leaders, as employees, based on these behaviors and values as part of our performance review, which is awesome. But performance reviews, you and I know, performance reviews really only occur, what? Once a year, maybe twice a year. You have a mid-year review. Some companies might do it quarterly. Great. And I was like, I wonder if there's any way that I could recognize as part of a feedback mechanism that I could recognize outstanding behaviors as they're occurring, just as a part of an ongoing feedback mechanism. So what I did is I took that slide, which is on the wall here at Cargill. It's on our website. You can find it. This slide here in front of you. And what I do is when I observe truly supportive behaviors on an ongoing basis, I send the individual who I observe demonstrating this with a little call out, and I copy their boss. And this has been something that's really funny, where I think this is a really cool idea. I have a little bit of bias on it, of course, but I think this is a really cool idea. And people have responded as I've sent these out over the years, like, thanks, Sean, I appreciate the recognition. Wonderful. Okay. The first time anybody verified or validated my bias that this is a cool idea was like last week when my communications lead saw this, and she was like, I didn't know you were doing this. This is a really cool idea. And I was like, Samantha, thank you, because you're the first one who agrees with me that this is a really cool idea. But there's a lesson in that, isn't there? Right? Like, just because you're not getting kudos or tons of recognition by your CEO for little things like this, just because they seem easy, they seem obvious, they seem sort of overly fundamental, doesn't mean you should stop doing it. Because I think this is a wonderful and easy way to lift culture. So this one I believe is working, even though only one person has told me they really like it. I'm going to continue to go with it. Next slide. Here's one that didn't work. And then I'm going to wrap up with the take-home message. Here's one I then started maybe just this year, like in the last 6 months or so. I started to put this slide at the very first slide of every presentation I give. And I look at my audience when I say, here's why we're here today. We're here because we need to reach higher. We're here because we continue to consistently do the right thing. This is why this meeting, this workshop, this project is advancing. And I kind of get this glazed over stare from my audience. I think this one's missing. I will continue to work and refine this to figure out new ways to get this in front of every meeting we hold. I think it's important. I think it's important to know, like, we're here today to do X with this problem to solve and this expected outcome. Oh, and by the way, Cargill is asking us to do stuff like this through our values and behaviors. The last thing I'm going to share with you, if you go to the next slide, we have experimented with pulling this into the skyscraper, right? Building out that food safety culture. So what does all of this look like and feel like? Those artifacts, as Lone just sort of shared with you. What does this look like in the food safety space? Here's a draft of that. We're working on this right now as my leadership team has continued to refine this. And that's really the three things that I'll share with you. Things maybe you could consider as you go back to your day jobs. I'll just wrap with just reinforcing what I just said, which is simply continue to try new things, right? Continue to experiment and explore and try on creative new ways of getting these values, getting the foundation paid attention to and invested in and supported. Some of them won't work. Some of them won't work right away. Some of them won't work at all. But that's the value of experimentation. As scientists, most of us on the call are scientists, I think we can embrace that for sure. And then the last message is, culture is not just the most recent communication your organization puts out. It's actually informed by tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of decisions and actions and behaviors that occur every single day within the context of where you are geographically, where you are in your company. And so make sure you address that and make sure your culture is working for you. Make sure you're not swimming upstream by yourself too frequently because that will, in my experience, begin to exhaust you. So my three takeaways from this, I want to thank you very, very much for the time, and I'm going to hand this over to continue this discussion from another perspective to Sarah with Arctic Storm.
Thank you, Sean. It's really nice to hear about your food safety culture at Cargill. And it's great to be here with everyone today. I'm Sarah Nayani with Arctic Storm Management Group in Seattle, Washington. Next slide. At Arctic Storm, we have 2 US flagged at sea processor fishing vessels, and they catch and process fish right on board. So we participate in 2 of the largest sustainable fisheries in the United States. We fish for wild Alaska pollock in the Bering Sea, and then Pacific whiting off of Washington and Oregon. So the boats go out fishing, they bring cod ends onto the vessel, and then they cut the fish on botter and toyo machines. They produce fillet blocks, surimi blocks, and roe. They freeze and package the products on board, and then they send them to our freezer holds. We also make fish meal and fish oil, so every single part of the fish is used. That's really important to us. The boats stay out for about 2 weeks until their freezer hold is full, and then they come into port to offload, and then they go right back out and do it again. It's really hard work, and what they're producing is extraordinary. So has everyone here eaten a McDonald's filet of fish or a California roll by chance? If you have, those products are made with wild Alaska pollock and Pacific hake, and they're certified as sustainable by the Marine Stewardship Council and other programs, so you can feel really good about it when you eat them. Next slide. So talking a little bit about our food safety and quality values, they're really simple, and we found simple to be the most effective. Safety, quality, and quantity in that order. So within our company, one of our factory managers, Craig Anderson, started saying this motto years ago, and it has really stuck with us as far as summarizing our values in a way that everyone can understand, super quick and easy. You can see a photo of some of our team at a dinner that we had before they left for Alaska. And I made them little temporary tattoos that say safety, quality, quantity. And we're just trying to find fun ways to sort of reinforce these values. But when you think about it more seriously, we really want to hit our production goals. We want to produce as much as we can in a fast-paced environment. But safety and quality have to come first, or else what we produce just can't be used if it's not safe and it's not high quality. Next slide. So we've learned that our relationship with food safety and quality is like a marriage. It's a living, breathing, and evolving relationship, and it needs to be nurtured. None of this works without the full commitment and reinforcement of our CEO. You can see him there, Doug Christensen. He attends many of our meetings, and he emphasizes his commitment to investments in food safety and quality. And without that underpinning the work that me and my team and the full food safety team and the vessels do, it really would be meaningless. You have to have that coming from, every part of your company. So we also know that living these values isn't possible without the right leaders in the right places, thinking creatively to solve problems, collaborating on board with different departments on the vessel and with the corporate office. Our vessel leadership does so much to train and motivate the team on board and instill those core values day by day. Next slide. One thing we found really effective is expanding our training across departments and hosting that training on board within our own teams. So just a couple things. We're a fishing vessel, so there's people on board to navigate, run the engine room, the electrical system, run the galley that feeds all of our crew. So not everyone on board works in the factory, but we've really been focusing on emphasizing that everyone on board is there with the mission to produce safe, quality food for the world, and that is really the guiding mission. And so everyone from all departments needs to take ownership in the food safety. And I know when I took a HACCP class for the first time, I just took a general class and it had people from all types of fishing and processing companies. And we didn't have enough experience to feel confident, like I didn't, asking questions at my first HACCP class. So I've learned that hosting these trainings on board in smaller groups within our own team has increased team building and improved people's willingness to engage and ask questions. And it's also built buy-in and greater understanding of our goals and why they're important. We've also found that reinforcing training with visuals that feature our crew has been effective. We have a lot of crew who speak English as their second language, so having summarizing posters that show rather than tell, using photos with very few words, that is drawing people in, especially when we're showing photos of our own crew in those training posters, because then it's someone you know and they're modeling food safety and quality reminders as something to strive for. There's a woman on my team, Megan, who has taken this to the next level, and one of our future goals is to make food safety training videos that feature our own crew. Next slide. In the world of food processing, we're a relatively small company, so we've always been able to have frequent communication with our vessel and within our corporate team. But as we've evolved our food safety and quality programs, one of the things we found helpful is setting intentional touch points for that communication and finding ways for that communication to reach more broadly within our teams. So just a couple examples. Each year we have a preseason meeting with all of the teams where we review progress towards our food safety and quality goals together, and then we establish our goals for the coming year. We've also been increasing communication between our customers and crew. And just as one example, we recently visited the production facility where our filet blocks get made into McDonald's filet of fish sandwich. And then as a team, we actually visited McDonald's afterwards to eat filet of fish together. So we're trying to find fun ways to take our mission, but like make it living, breathing values. Our internal audits have also been another great form of communication. We've trained internal auditors across vessel departments, so they're more fluent in the Global Food Safety Initiative food safety standard. And any findings or corrective actions from internal audits are shared within our team and we review them together. Last year, we also created a newsletter to better communicate progress towards our food safety and quality goals, provide audit and inspection takeaways, updates on best practices, support continual improvement, generate new ideas, and then most importantly, to acknowledge the incredible work our team does to create high quality and delicious food that's eaten around the world. So as part of the newsletter, we began featuring 2 employees of the quarter, one from each vessel, and it's been really valuable because it's built more familiarity within our team and created an opportunity for our corporate team and crew across both vessels to get to know each other better and more background info on some of the crew that are really living and breathing our values on board. The last one is eating what we make. We've been putting, that's the next slide. We've been putting a big emphasis on eating the food we produce as a way to connect our daily work in our factories to the end product. So when you're standing on the line day after day making filet or surimi blocks, it can be really easy to see your job, see it as your job and not necessarily connect it to the final product or who's eating that product. So here you can see we brought in a food truck to serve wild Alaska pollock that our crew caught right back to them. So it was our own blocks that were made into a delicious lunch. And then we also held a contest during Lent last year to see who in our corporate team could eat the most wild Alaska pollock sandwiches. And it's been a really fun way to live our food safety culture goals as a team and connect the food we eat back to the mission of food safety for what we're producing. And so the last slide is just a summary of some of these goals. Everything starts with the commitment and the people, doing cross-departmental training, communication, team building, and visuals that show your own team. And then proactive, ongoing, and creative reinforcement that's specific to your team, that highlights them in the food that you make. Those have been ways that my company's found to live our values. And it's been a really exciting and long process, and we've learned a lot along the way. So I'm so thankful to Sean and everyone else and looking forward to chatting more in the next little bit.
Hey,
Thank you.
Sarah, Hey, Sarah, I have a quick question for you before we
Yeah,
get into the audience Q&A.
I love this.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump the queue, so to speak. Hey, two vessels, right? Two vessels.
Yes.
100 and I think it was 150, 160 people on each, maybe more. Um, I'm sure there are like tailwinds, pun, tailwinds and headwinds associated with having such a like an an isolated sort of community of employees. Can you just share a little bit of light on that? Like how does that benefit your cultural efforts and what are some of the sort of unique challenges to being on a boat for how long is each vessel out for before they come back and turn over?
They're out for about 2 weeks. And yeah, just like you said, it's a really unique sector. There's very
Yeah.
few at-sea processors. And it's funny because we kind of get left out of two groups, either fishing vessels that just fish and they deliver shoreside, or shoreside processing plants that process fish. No one ever thinks about this sector. And so it is really unique having crew on board and more isolated when they're out at sea. But yeah, some of the challenges are space. I mean, we have a whole deck on each boat, that's the factory, and then we have other decks for cold storage, for holding our packaging and supplies. But it is really, really tough because we're limited by space. And so some of the things, like when I walk through shoreside plants, I'm so jealous. I'm like, oh my God, there's so much room. You guys can spread out. Our lines are like super tight, and it's, yeah, really tough conditions because the factory is doing this while you're on board. So some of the challenges are just that we're moving when we're producing, obviously being in really isolated areas. But one thing that's really unique and cool is that anything that we do, we have to know, like any equipment on board, we have to have crew on board that know how to fix that. And so it's just such an inspiring team because there's so much knowledge. If a machine breaks and we can't fix it, we have to come all the way back to Dutch Harbor, like a 48-hour steam, and then maybe fly someone in from Norway to fix the engine or do, some of these parts that we need from around the world. So it's really
Fascinating.
inspiring to see like people problem solving and fixing the problems in a way that like I don't know as much about shoreside plants, but it's been really cool to see. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I've never been referred to as a shoreside plant. I can tell you that. So thank you for
I
that.
should say
I'll take
shoreside
that.
fishing plant, but then
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
a processing facility more generally.
Yeah. And I imagine culturally, like just that challenge you just said, like if something breaks, I mean, it is incredibly disruptive to logistically and just throughput and everything. I imagine that's like kind of a nice to have as part of your culture. Like this idea of prevention is just so essential to you. Really cool. Thanks for the presentation. I'll go on mute and let the audience, I don't know, Vanessa, you're running the show. I'll go on mute and get out of the way here.
Well, hopefully my audio is a little better. People can tell me if they are still hearing some weird feedback. Apologies. I will encourage folks to put your questions in the chat. We have a lot of hands up today. Not in the chat. Sorry, I misspoke. Put them in the Q&A so that others can upvote them. But Sean, stay off of mute because we have a question that I really want to ask from Katie Blackshear. It's a great one. What advice do you have for an organization that begins to participate in behaviors that don't align with their values?
Oh, that is such a good question, and I'll give you my knee-jerk reaction to it, and then we may want to get Lone. Lone is the cultural guru on this. I would actually be thrilled to hear what Lone has to say about this. I think just practically, I think addressing it's almost a little bit what I'm trying to do here, not to toot my own horn or whatever, but like instead of allowing it to fester and grow and become part of the expected norm of how we work, I think addressing those things immediately, one is kinder because I don't know about you all, but when I get negative feedback, the worst kind of negative feedback, especially something so precious as values, right? Or culture or behaviors, I don't want a conversation with an executive or a boss or a key stakeholder to be like, hey, Sean, last June, when you showed up in this way, or when you stated X, or you used these words, it really didn't sit well. I want to know, like, hey, Sean, as we're walking out of the auditorium, right? Hey, Sean, psst, come here. We don't use those words at Cargill, right? Like those, maybe some places they do, but like that message did not land because of your just the choice of whatever that you chose to communicate with. So I think a key to this is to almost like nip it in the bud very, very early, very, very quickly, avoid it from becoming kind of part of the furniture of the place. But again, I think Lone will have a much better, well thought out response to this. And Lone, maybe I bought you some time to think about it. So what do you think, Lone?
Sean, I'm putting another dime in the what's it called, where you put your money when you park somewhere. So thank you for that time. But I think from my perspective, there's really three things that you need to consider. One, is it systemic? So is this an individual, a couple of individuals that might be interpreting your values and acting in a different way than intended? And because that way you might actually have to go back and say, okay, let's just reevaluate. Are these our values? And if they are, have we done what I think you saw from Sean? Have you actually taken the time to interpret or make some suggested interpretations of your values into what are the behaviors that we're expecting from everybody? I think that's a big gap in many organizations. We put values on the wall and they're well intended, but the work has not gone into actually giving guidance on. So what does that mean from a behavioral perspective? So I think that's a couple of ways to address that one. And then I think you also need to obviously feedback. Sean covered that. No need to really talk about that again. But it's also acknowledging that I have, and all of us have, our personal values. We join organizations. Organizations cannot they can't say to us, you must now have these personal values. So I go back to that cognitive dissonance. You might actually have some conflicting that I just don't see how I can show up and not look for that foreign material in the cabbages because everybody is just so focused on production numbers. And then it comes down to choice. So are you aligned to the values in the organization? Are you better off somewhere else? And it also comes down to your choices, leaders and managers, that you might have some people on your team that are just not really values aligned with what it is that your organization stands for. So I think there's a lot of ways you can look at that particular question, and I think it's a really good one, and potentially maybe, Vanessa, topic for future webinars. But I think you have to look at it from multiple angles. So there's a very complex answer, but I'm sure I'm sort of looking at Conrad a little bit here. Conrad.
I was just going to add that it can also be a function, and I've seen this in some of the organizations I've been in, is sometimes we're not clear about what those values are, and I think this gets at your cognitive dissonance, but where it becomes clear is when you hand out your rewards and your recognitions, right? And so if you are you may be inadvertently reinforcing bad behavior because you're rewarding on a good behavior of that. Well, so like you're reinforcing as you mentioned, Lone, the output. So it's like, yeah, this guy's a jerk, but I mean, he's always hitting his marks, right? And so that person just inadvertently gets reinforced in terms of that behaviors because he's getting or she's getting the rewards for the output versus the value.
Mm-hmm.
And and Lone, I agree. We could do a whole session on this topic. It's a great one. I do want to give Sarah a couple of minutes if you have anything to add from your perspective.
No, I think they covered it well. I'd say let's move on to the next one.
Okay, Conrad, do you want to pick the next question? Anything in the chat that you're seeing?
I mean, this is a little bit related, so I'm not sure, and I don't know if we have anything more to say this, but balancing the positive and the negative feedback in order to shape your culture. So I know you kind of touched on it, Sean, but maybe Sarah, you can talk to this. I mean, you showed us how you've been reinforcing your values, but how do you, I guess you have the carrots, but do you have the sticks as well to kind of nudge people away from bad behaviors?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one of the ways that we reflect on things that were not positive in our year is to review any like customer claims, kind of anything like a finding that we had in our audits, things like that together. And that can be difficult sometimes because there can be various reasons why something didn't get done correctly or why, it's all fish, but if something ends up in the wrong box or we're not sending the right product to the right customer, things like that. So I would say we do a lot of those through reviews and we try not to be super negative or bring out a stick. We have had a few food safety issues where we have had to let certain employees go before. So that's the ultimate stick, right? If someone's not fitting in with your culture and they're doing things that actively undermine that. So I would say those are two of the ways is we try to do more positive reviews, but go through it as a team and not place blame. Try to get to the root problem or the root cause. And then we try to respond to corrective actions together of like how we're going to write those and implement those as a team. So those are some of the ways we, I guess, bring out the stick and like you said, we covered some of the carrot already. So I'll pass it to Sean if he has more insight.
I'm actually going to hop in there first, Sean. Um, and it's one of the best management advices that I was given early career in one of my first management roles was that because I come from a culture where it's very direct communication, it's very much you suck and you got to fix it. And my manager was sort of, okay, Lon, we got to sort of change that. And I'm coming back to Conrad, your positive and negative reinforcements here. And what he said was take just a simple piece of paper, put a little grid on it, put the days down the left-hand side, Monday through to Sunday, if that's how you work. And then every day you count, when did I say something positive to somebody I work with? When did I say something negative? And just do that for a week. And you get a little bit of a self-assessment, a little bit of a mirror that you're holding up saying, do I actually mostly tell people that they suck at something, right? And it was an eye-opener. I tell you, whatever you do, don't go crazy on it and go into Excel and do conditional and formatting because that is just going to blow your mind. But it's just a simple way to say, okay, can we have a balanced message instead of saying that we always come after the what needs to be fixed all the time.
I love that little self-assessment loan. That's a really tangible thing that you can do. I want to ask a question. So we've got a few kind of touching on this, so I'll kind of combine the questions. But folks are really interested in measuring food safety culture as always, and we do have a couple of other webinars on that. But I'm curious if there are ways that you can measure against your values and how you might do that and see those shifts start to happen.
Sean, am I going to cut you off if I quickly just
I was hoping you would, Lone. Thank you.
Well, I want to go back to actually one of Sean's points to maybe tee up your perspective on it, Sean, because one of the things that I am absolutely in full alignment with both Sarah and Sean on is that unless you look at your organizational or company culture and how that enables what you do for food safety and quality, then you're building the skyscraper to use John's analogy here on a very weak foundation. So I think it's about figuring out how strong is your organizational or company culture, Vanessa, and then saying how does that help or hinder what you do for food safety. So it's just a little bit of a twist on it because I think values belong in the organizational culture, in contrast to in food safety culture. Over to you, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I think has been successful here at Cargill, and I did reference this during my few minutes earlier, but Cargill's done a really nice job of embedding our values and behaviors in our performance review as individuals, and I think that that could lead to like some really interesting um, I don't do this, but I think in HR they probably on the people side they probably do have some very interesting assessments or like metadata around are we seeing performance uptick on putting people first over the last couple of years, or are we seeing that drop down more? Like I think there's some really good on the value side. I think by embedding that into your performance review, you can figure out some ways to measure it, if not directly, certainly indirectly. Um, it's an interesting question on the food safety side. As we build the skyscraper and we continue to refine what we define as our quote unquote food safety culture, which I put it in quotes simply because Lone will laugh at me because we've had this conversation several times in the past, but I put it in quotes simply because a food safety culture is simply how the culture of your organization informs your food safety behaviors is all we're talking about here, right? There's no such thing as like a food safety culture or a safety culture right, like it's culture. And then how does that inform what we're trying our objectives? So anyway, I think that's it's a very good question. I think it's something on the food safety side we should continue to think about. I don't have a great answer for you, but in terms of values, certainly measuring the performance of your organization the way Cargill has, and others do this as well, we're not alone, is a great start.
Sarah, is there anything you want to add there?
Well, I would say sometimes quantitatively it can be hard to measure some of those values. I mean, there's ways that you can, of course. But I think just like qualitatively, some of the things that I've been thinking of is like when we have trained internal auditors from a different department on the vessel provide meaningful feedback about something that could be improved in the factory and production. I look at that as a cultural win because that means that people are feeling safe to bring things up that need to be improved and have that finding. And so I've been trying to look at little ways like that are indicators of like cultural progress and evolution, I guess. Our company also did loans culture exercise where we went through and self-rated ourselves on our culture at the beginning before we started our GFSI certification. And then we did that on each vessel as well. And then we need to do that exercise again. We did it after 1 year of being certified, but it would be good to bring that back and do it again. I think there's really good exercises like that that people could do as a team or use that as a way to measure improvement in perceived culture. So just an idea.
Vanessa, can I just inject there? So
Always.
Sarah's, what Sarah's referring to is available to everybody. I mean, it's take our maturity model, use it in your management discussion. So it's really something you can do anybody without. There's no cost associated with it or anything like that.
So I want to
Sloan?
dig in a little bit on something, Sean, you just said. And I think it relates to a number of different questions that I see in the chat. And that was that there's no food safety culture, there's no safety culture. It is your organizational culture, and that informs your approach to safety or food safety. And this is for both of you, Sarah and Sean. So how does that translate in terms of some of the concepts that we've explored in these webinars in terms of like managing up and getting your C-suite to be on board with food safety as being something that's important? You can embed your values, as you said, in the performance expectations, but if food safety is not explicit in there, I mean, how do you have that food safety across the board? And let's just start there. There's a whole bunch of different directions you could take with this, but I know we only have 10 minutes, so let me toss it back to you, if that was clear.
Sarah, you want this? You want me to kick us off? Okay, I'll kick us off. Yeah, it's a bit of an art, I think, Conrad, right? Like, I don't think you can, at least in my experience, approaching your C-suite, your CEO, with sort of an alarmist mentality or an alarmist attitude doesn't work very well, right? Um, what what I find works is more effective to get food safety in the hearts and minds of the entire organization from the top down is to be really, really almost deliberate about how food safety is critical to your organization's mission, right? Here's an example. I've heard our CEO at Cargill say, in my words, not his words exactly, but like Cargill has the opportunity to be one of the most consequential food companies on the planet. Okay? Not far-fetched if you look at everything we touch, the slide I showed you earlier. Interesting idea. Okay, well, this is an open door for a food safety leader, right? Because CEO, C-suite, board, if we are to be the most positively consequential food company on the planet, food safety has to be a part of that platform. Absolutely has to be. And now I can work with him on ways that can happen, ways to communicate and share that with the audience, ways to make this his, because those are his aspirations for Cargill, right? So it's a bit of an art. It's a bit of a strategic mindset. You can't go in alarmist, kicking down doors, right? Pounding your shoe on the table. That doesn't work very well. But incorporating it into the overall company strategy, I think, is the best way to do that. And then you can follow up with, now that you see that this is a part of your platform, continue to bang the drum on food safety every chance you can get. Don't miss a single opportunity. Don't miss a single one. Sarah.
Sure, yeah. I was just gonna, I think that's great advice. And I was gonna say that I think like our C-suite, we only have 30 people in our corporate office, so there's a team of directors, it's pretty small. But I think people have bought into the idea of food safety just from a super practical point of view of like, we're obviously selling a product. We don't want to have any like we want to build that brand and that trust in that brand. And when you have a food safety issue or something that harms people, then you're ruining that reputation and that brand. And so holding those values up really high is just super critical on a feedback loop from customers to production. And so I think that just kind of from a practical level, hopefully everyone on a C-suite is invested in food safety and quality if you're a food production team. But one of the things that we've been doing is we actually went to each department and tried to identify how they support the goals of food safety and culture. And we've really prioritized that we make food. That's what our company does. That's why we exist as a company. And if every team isn't contributing to making sure that that food is safe and quality, like HR hiring the right people in the right positions to emphasize that, or the logistics of moving our product around the world, our marketing team being able to go into meetings with confidence, those sorts of things I think help reinforce how everybody's connected to this mission. And I think sometimes explicitly saying that and thinking about that is really helpful. So
Sarah, I love that. And I think it ties straight into, so if you think about what is culture, if we just go right back to basics, it's assumptions that have been adopted by a group of people because it's made them successful. So if you go into Shine's work, that's the definition. So that means we are assuming that if we run fast lines, get our bonuses, hit or exceed our production targets, and if we get rewarded for that, then we're assuming that that's what makes us successful as a group. So I think what you can do is you can help your leaders, and you have to help them by a little bit of self-assessment to say, these are the prevailing ways that people describe our success. And if food safety is not part of that, and you are a food company, just like both Sean and Sarah's companies, then it's your duty to put that in front of your leaders and make them aware of this gap, but be factual in it, be constructive in it, do some focus groups internally, and gather some information to say, so what do you think makes us successful as a company? And then you summarize those data, and then you go to your leaders and you say, hey, we're missing a food safety piece or component in this, and I'm worried about this. And then it's leaders their accountability, your leader's accountabilities, is to set the assumptions through your values that you want to have as what makes you the best food company in the world, or living up to your mission, right? So I think we can use that to some extent. And it also feeds right into who many of you are on these webinars. You are scientists, you're factual people, you're rational people, you're beautiful people, all of you, with those competencies. Use those to gather information that way, and then use your credibility for being those types of people as well in this field of food safety by going to your leaders with something factual and constructive like that. So I think there's something there that could help, Conrad.
Conrad,
Being very silent, and when Conrad being silent is because he disagrees. So I'm kind of looking forward to this.
Conrad, do you have a rebuttal or
warming up for Rosemont?
No debate there. No debate there.
No debate there.
I do like Lone's definition of culture, which is the assumptions that we all have that have made us successful. But the point I think about what we've been saying in our webinar series is that we have to get beyond those assumptions, and we have to be intentional, right? We have to all be on the same page about what those assumptions are, incorporate and define those as our values, and then operationalize our values. And so everyone has a culture. It's just, or everyone's part of an organizational culture, whether they know it or not. It's just, are you intentional about it?
And you said this over and over again, Conrad, and I so agree with that as well, is that you have a culture, we all agree and we all say that, but you add to that by saying also, and it will evolve, even if you don't take control of that evolution, right?
Right.
So that's, I think, equally important in how to address this.
It's like one of Sarah's processing units at sea, right? If they're not actively keeping it in where they want it to be, then it will drift.
Absolutely.
Well, Conrad, I think that's a wonderful place to kind of wrap up here with that thought. Lily, I'll ask you to throw the slides back up on the screen so we can plug our next event, which I'm really excited about. We have something we're dubbing the Culture Change Carnival as our next webinar. We will be having a lightning round session that will provide real practical tools for folks around what people are doing to advance their food safety cultures. So that will be on April 15th. You can sign up for that on our website. We will also have an email go out with all of the materials for today and a link for the registration page. I would also encourage everyone to take the survey that's going to pop up when you exit the webinar. We really do take your feedback to heart, thinking about continuous improvement. We are always trying to make these sessions as great as they can be. And I would really like to thank our guest speakers today. What a wonderful discussion. I'm seeing a lot of hearts come up for you all and claps. And yeah, it was such a wonderful session. So thank you so much. And we will see you all back here on April 15th.